Please open your books up to page 84. I seem a little confused. We're right at the moment we're doing 4 meetings with the Bigbook, so I get kind of confused as to which meeting is where in the book. I hope you forgive me. Page 84, please. Okay, tonight we're going to be taking a look at the 10th step, reading about it. Before we get started with the reading, let's remind ourselves where we've come from and where we're headed and what's going on here. First of all, when we came in the door, we were in a state of rebellion and defiance and denial. We were spiritually bankrupt and we were crazy as hell. Our minds didn't work right. We were blocked off from God. We were full of self. We were living on self-will. We were playing God for ourselves, and that didn't work. We were staying drunk or high or both, and our lives were a mess. We felt hopeless. We felt as if life had passed us by. Kind of like you're born, life's a bitch, and you die, and so what? And then we came in here and people looked at us and said, now look, there are some things you can do. We find them in our big book here. And if you do these things, you can recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So start out and read the book. So that's what we did. We read the book and then kept going to meetings. We started to pray a little bit. We started maybe even doing a little meditation. And then we suddenly realized that we'd come to understand that we were in fact alcoholics and that we were powerless over alcohol. We could not stop drinking on our own. Now that's the bottom line with this. Remember, guys, that's the base fact for each one of us. That we can't stop on our own. No matter how much we may want to, no matter how afraid we might be of the consequences of drinking, we can't stop. If you can stop on your own, you're welcome to be here, but you're not an alcoholic. And so, for most of us in this room, we were in this situation. We had a disease which was deadly, incurable, and progressive. And if we didn't stop drinking, we were going to die. And we couldn't stop. So then we came in, God got us in here, great miracle was worked in our lives, and people said to us, look, there's some things you can do here. We'll show you if you want. And you will find that the drink problem will simply disappear, go away. It won't be there anymore, it'll be solved. We didn't know whether to believe that or not, but we didn't have anything else to turn to, so we decided we'd do it. The process of working the steps up through the ninth step, some amazing things happened. We went from a place of rebellion and defiance and denial to a place where we were no longer blocked off from God. The things in ourselves which had been blocking us from God, our defects of character, our insanities, and our guilt, remorse, and shame, these were all taken from us. And all we did was follow some simple directions. And yet it worked. We couldn't even say for sure why. But we just know that it did work. And so when we got up to the ninth step, we made some amends. And our sponsor said, okay, it's time now for you to learn how you're going to live the rest of your life. Remember when we were doing our ninth step, we found a phrase in the big book, page 83, that said that the spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it. And of course we looked ahead, and every time we've heard the steps read, we think about this. The 12th step says we're to practice these principles in all of our affairs. And so when we got to the 10th step and our sponsor said, now this is the time when we're going to learn to live by spiritual principles. Our sponsor took us back to the page 63, right above the 3rd step prayer, and we read something there that is stuck in our minds. That God will give us everything we need, and that of course includes sobriety, freedom from alcohol, but also includes happiness and joyousness and freedom, and a fellowship and a friendship and love from others, and a chance to give love back, and a chance to watch other people grow around us. A chance to have a purpose in life, a mission that we never had before. A chance to recognize that our lives have value. We have value. We are not nobodies, drunken bums, crackheads, whatever it is that we were doing to ourselves. We're a lot more than that. We're valuable human beings, and we have a purpose in life, and we have something we can do which will fulfill our lives and will help others and make us feel like we're real people, not just shadow people. Because we've been shadowing through life for a long time. And so we read what it said, that God will give us everything we need if we do two things: if we stay close to Him and if we perform His work well. Now what's happening here is, see, back there in that third step, we weren't close to God. We were still terribly blocked off because we hadn't done anything to find out what was wrong with us. We hadn't taken inventory yet. Nevertheless, the promise was there. And now when we've reached the ninth step and we're getting into the 10th step, some marvelous things have happened. We're no longer blocked from God. In our fourth step, we found out what was blocking us. We found out whom we had harmed. We made a list of the people we need to make amends to, and we became willing to make those amends. And in the fifth step, we sat down with somebody, stared them in the eye, and told them exactly what was going on with us. In the process of doing that, things began to clear up. In fact, we began to have a spiritual awakening right then. And our fears were taken from us. And then we went to the seventh step, and we asked God to take away all of these defects that we'd found. And this happened. Don't let anybody kid you. This is not something that drags on and on and on. Every time we put a limit on God's power to help us, we limit His power to help us, because therefore we're not open to it, and we're not going to accept it. And we're going to sit back and snigger a little bit and say, well, you know, God doesn't take away all our defects. That's a bunch of balderdash, total balderdash. Truth of the matter is that God has all the power, and if we're willing to let Him have our defects, He takes them. Doesn't mean that they don't come back. But see, now that's where the 10th step's going to come in, isn't it? But the defects were taken, and then when we did our amends in our 9th step, we got rid of our guilt. And that was blocking us from God just as much as our defects were. And now, we've come to a place where defects are gone. Oh sure, we still have to deal with them every day, the ones that come back, because they will. And our guilt is gone, and we've had the beginnings of, very strong beginnings of a spiritual awakening, and the promises are coming true. And so now what's going to happen? We read back there in the 3rd step that we're going to have to stay close to God, and that then He would give us everything we need. The other requirement being that we be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Do His work well. So that's what their sponsor says to us. Here's where we go with this 10th step and the 11th step and the 12th step. These are the steps you're going to live with the rest of your life. You don't have to go back and do another 4th and 5th step. You can do it if you want to, but you're not going to have to, because you're going to be taking inventory every day. Nothing will ever get ahead of you. You'll always know what's going on, and you'll take care of it on the spot. But more importantly, what will have happened by this time is that you will have passed over the Rubicon. You will have gone from a place of rebellion and defiance and denial to a place where you are now reaching full surrender and a willingness to do God's will and a willingness to seek His will. All of that is true, but there's something here that we have to be very aware of. If I'm going to retain my spiritual fitness, I'm going to have to be free of the things which would block me from God. That's the one sure way to fall back. This means that I'm going to need to grow spiritually from now on. Because you see, it's a truism. There's no standing still spiritually, ever. We either grow or we go. Just going like going up an escalator that's coming down. You gotta walk faster going up than it's coming down. Stand still, you go right back down the bottom. And this means that we're dealing with something now, the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps, which is going to be there with us all the rest of our lives. And it's going to be a daily routine, a disciplined, consistent daily routine. Now then, if we look carefully at what's happened to us, we will understand that when we began, we were totally blocked from God and we were insane. We couldn't stop drinking on our own. In order for us to not fall back into that exact same hole we were in before, we're going to have to stay free of the things that block us. That is, in particular, our defects of character, our insanities, and our guilt. Now here's what happened. And there's a kind of an interesting history to this step. If you look, remember when we were back there in Bill's story, on page 13, we were reading about what Bill did in the hospital. And while he was in the hospital, in the town's hospital for the last time, and Abby was working with him, he in effect worked all the rest of the steps. He'd worked the first and second steps in effect before he got there, and he worked the rest of them except the 12th step, which came to him as an inspiration while he was still in the hospital, except the 10th step. We can look in vain for a 10th step back there in Bill's story. It's not there. And the reason for this is very simple. At that time, Bill and the others who came in after him were following the precepts and the steps of a bunch of people called the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group had it in mind that once you had done their 6 steps that you became perfect. You got perfect this and perfect that. It was almost like being elected to sainthood. And so they had no follow-on program that was being taught to our guys. But our guys found out that that wasn't true, that they did not become perfect. Remember what we read in every meeting in the 5th chapter. And we're not saints. We don't claim spiritual perfection. But we do claim spiritual progress. Hopefully we can claim spiritual progress. There's no way we can claim that if we're not doing the work to grow and to progress spiritually. But ideally we can claim it because we are doing the work. See, here's what happened. They found out that when they'd done the work of the steps, and then they went out there and they had to live in the world, and the world and all of its people would continue to threaten them. And threat translates to fear, and fear, as we know now, translates automatically into defects. It is the defects of character which are killing us, and these defects are the result of fear warping and perverting our natural instincts for sex, security, and society. Well, this process can keep right on going. Which means then that our defects will come back on us, even though they have been removed from us at the time that we worked our steps. The stuff that we brought in here with us is gone. So they found out that they were getting sick again. They found out that they were not able to stay free of their defects and their guilt. And they said, whoa, what's going on here? We got to have a way to deal with this. And then they looked around and they said, wait a second. We already have all these tools. We got rid of these defects once. Why can't we do this all the time? We have the tools of inventory in the 4th step, admission of our defects and our wrongs in our 5th step, submission of our defects and our wrongs and our insanity to God in the 7th step, and making amends in the 9th step. And we found out that when we did this, the 4th, 5th, 7th, and 9th steps, they worked. All these things that blocked us from God were gone. They were taken from us. And these are things we couldn't get rid of ourselves. So why don't we just take these tools that we've already learned how to use, we'll put them all together in one step, and we'll use them every day. That seems simple enough. What a great solution. And out of this came the 10th step. They added one more thing to it. Because by that time they'd found that one of the most sure ways of making clear and assuring our spiritual progress was to work for other people, to carry the message. You remember back in Bill's story what he said? He said, if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he cannot survive the certain low spots ahead, and he'll drink again. So therefore they said, okay, let's add in the 12th step. So now if we have a step that's 4, 5, 7, and 9, and 12, we got something. Now how often do we have to use this? Well, some would argue maybe once a week. You kind of go back and you pick up a little bit here, a little bit there, and you sort of take care of it. And he said, no, it's not the way it's going to work. Trial and error showed them that they couldn't do it that way. Trial and error showed them this, that what they were doing was sacrificing all the days in between the time the defect cropped up and the time they took care of it, and all those days were going down the toilet. Anger, resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, fear, all those things were wiping out those days. So they had to do something about it, and then they figured out that the only way this was going to work is to take care of it every day. Now that's where the 10th step came from. It came from necessity. It came from the fact that they did not have this tool to work with, but they found out that they had to have it. So let's take a look on page 84, and we're going to see how this all came about. I want you to remember now that the promises are nothing more nor less than the inevitable result of working the steps. They are automatic. You're going to receive these promises if you do the work. What does it tell us? They will always, always materialize if we work for them. What part of always don't we understand? Pretty simple word. It's an absolute, it's a categorical imperative. So now we have had the promises. They've all come true or they're coming true. Sometimes a little slower for some of us. But now we're ready to embark on the rest of our lives. Literally, the rest of our lives are going to be monitored by and directed by steps 10, 11, and 12. And these steps are all of a piece. They all work together. Each step performs a major function in this business of spiritual growth and staying close to God and performing God's work well. These are the things that we now must do for the rest of our lives. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. So let's see what it says on page 84. There's a paragraph here which begins in the middle of the page, which is the entire 10th step. The following 3 paragraphs are not the 10th step. They are paragraphs which are a transition between the 10th and 11th steps, and they tell us where we have come to, and they tell us what we must do from here on. So let's take a look at this paragraph that tells us about the 10th step. This thought brings us to step 10, but suggests we continue to take personal inventory. Let's stop right there. What is an inventory? What did we find out back there in the 4th step? We wanted to be able to do this in our heads. We want to just go down that list on page 64 and say, oh, well, yeah, well, let's see, page 65, let's see, yeah, I'm kind of mad at Mom, well, because she didn't do, we want to just be able to do this way, and we can end up saying, well, I don't have very many resentments. Well, what did I do wrong? Well, let's see, maybe I don't think I was real honest all the time. Fears, oh, I'm not afraid of anything, you know. Sex crimes, no way, man. All those crimes are committed against me. I didn't do anything wrong. Well, I finished my 4th step. Some of us now these days want to do it on a word processor. No, 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 no. No, no, no. No, there's something magical about picking up a pen and putting it to paper. Something that flows from our head down onto paper isn't going to happen through the electronic means of a word processor. That's just a little aside, and you're all going to say, well, look at him, he's 74 years old, what the hell does he know? And as a matter of fact, you point me in the direction of a computer, I'm scared to death of that sucker. I'm afraid it's going to blow up if I hit something wrong. However, inventory, we found out about inventory. It's a written list. An inventory is a written list. You don't take inventory in your head. You wouldn't think of doing that if you run a business. And we don't think of doing that either when we're talking about our very lives. We need to find out each day exactly what our present situation is. What's going on with us today? What is it that's come up that may block us from God and ruin our day and even be dangerous for us? So we continue to take personal inventory, and we continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. What's the lesson there? It's very simple. Look, we had to do the 8th and 9th steps, the 4th and 8th and 9th steps, in order to be free of the things that we were guilty and remorseful about, because they were blocking us off from God. Why would we not take care of those things now every day when they come up? And of course, it's the only thing that makes sense. This whole program, all these steps make sense when you think them through. They're all very simple, very logical, and very mechanical. We do the work, we get the results. Then it tells us that we vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Now, if you're making notes in your book, underline the word as, because this is very important to understand what that means. That means during the time that we are making amends, we will commence living in 10, 11, and 12. Why? Well, that's very simple. You think it through. Some amends will go on for a lifetime. Some amends we may not be able to make for years. Some people we don't know where they are, but we're ready to make amends to them if we ever see them again. Are we going to sit around and wait until all of this time has passed? Hell, we may be dead before we ever start working 10, 11, and 12. So the Big Book recognizes this and makes allowances for it, that we're going to commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Now, this way of living ought to give us a clue as to what's going on here. This is a way of life. This is not just a couple of nice little things we sort of ought to do every once in a while. We get around to it. In the Big Book, and in the 12 steps in the Big Book, we're talking here about a way of living. And when we address these steps as a way of life and begin to utilize them as such, our whole life changes. This is the one way that we can be assured that we will be in God's pocket and we will stay there and we will be bulletproof. There can be all kinds of things going on in our lives. We may get hurt. We may have all sorts of things happen to us, but we will find that those things would have happened anyway. And it's now the question of how we go through them. Because when we go through them with God on our side, it's a totally different ballgame. But most assuredly, being in God's pocket means we don't drink again. The obsession, compulsion to drink alcohol or to take drugs is gone. And so long as we stay there, it never comes back. Never. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Oh man, think about how powerful that statement is. Remember back there in the 4th step that we were talking, the Big Book's talking about the resentments and how they're #1 killer of alcoholics. It talked to us about the fact that resentments shut us off from the sunlight of the Spirit, and we drink again. Now here, we've reached the 10th step, and by this time we have entered the world of the Spirit. Very, very important. This is what's happened. This is This is a major part of our spiritual awakening. Now if you remember again, going back into the 4th chapter, it told us, in the 4th chapter we learned that we were going to find God deep down inside ourselves. It was only there that He could be found. It was so with us. That we have come now to a point where we recognize the existence of God, the power of God, and the power He plays in our lives. But more than that, you know, many of us are able to recognize early on that God loves us. But boy, what a wonderful revelation when we finally realize that we love Him. And that does happen. And so we have entered the world of the Spirit. We're no longer blocked off from God. The things that blocked us are gone. What a wonderful thing. Now then, our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. See, when we read the book together, we try very hard to understand everything we're reading. And this means that we have to, in effect, parse the sentences. Because every sentence in this big book is critical. And every word is important. All the phrases are important. In this sentence, we have two extremely important words: understanding and effectiveness. Okay, let's see what we're talking about here. What would understanding apply to? Where do we continue to hear this word understanding or understood? In the steps, right? With reference to what? To God. The God of my understanding. And this is exactly what this refers to. That we're going to grow in our understanding of our higher power. And you can ask yourself, what is this understanding? When I say this, and I mean it, but do I know what I'm saying? What is my understanding of God? Have I ever tried to articulate it? Have I ever sat down with my friends and shared with them, with each of us sharing with the others what our understanding of God? Maybe it's just something that's innate, it doesn't need to be articulated. But is there a true understanding? Now some of us with a strict religious background will probably say that my understanding of God comes from the Bible or the Koran or the Talmud or from Zen writings. But for most of us, I suppose the question of understanding is not something that we've been told must be so, because is that true understanding or not? There's a kind of little rule, you know. When I hear about it, I'm interested. When I see it, I believe it. When I experience it, I understand it. Maybe that tells us then that our understanding of God is a matter of our experiencing God. Now how do we do that? We take one leap of faith after another. And in working the first 9 steps, there are a whole bunch of those leaps of faith in there. You know, they tell us this is what will work. The Big Book says this is what we do. We say, okay. And we go after it and we do it. And when it does work, we say, wow, that worked. Son of a gun, that really worked. And then the next thing we look up, and again we've got to take another leap of faith, and we do that and it works, and we say, wow, that worked too. Pretty soon we get pretty well used to the idea that when we go to God and we do these certain things that the Big Book instructs us to do, it works. God is there. We begin then to experience God working in our lives. And for most of us, I'm convinced our understanding of God is the God that we experience. And so then that means that this sentence begins to have some real power to it. Our function is to grow in understanding. And for most of us that means in the experiencing of God, which leads us to our understanding of God. And we're going to allow this to happen, and we're going to ask for it to happen. We're going to open up ourselves to let that happen. We're going to be willing to let God come in. And we're going to be willing to begin to take the action of trust, so that faith without works is dead, we know. But faith that we have developed, and we now put it to work, and we trust. And every time we trust, the trust is fulfilled. We're never let down. over a period of time, we get to a point where we understand God that we've experienced. And I think that's what this sentence is telling us. Should grow in understanding of God. The next word is effectiveness. Effectiveness in what? Well, what is it that we found out our purpose here is? Our purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's what we're here for. Being of maximum service. Effectiveness. Effectiveness in carrying the message. Effectiveness in carrying this message to other alcoholics. Effectiveness in practicing these principles in all of our affairs. We get to grow in understanding and effectiveness by the working of the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps. That's what it's telling us. And this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. What don't we understand about it? And why in the world should it frighten us or make us angry or make us doubt or say, oh, I gotta keep doing this the rest of my life? Yes. It should continue for a lifetime. Therefore, we know that the Big Book admonition, which we're going to come to on the next page, which goes like this, that every day is a day when we must carry a vision of God's will for us into all our activities. Every day. And that we have but a daily reprieve. And that's true too. So now, if those things are true, then how are we going to go about doing this except to take as true that from now on, for the rest of our lives, we're going to be using the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps every day. And then it gets real simple, because we don't have to stop and figure out, well, can I slap off for these 3 days? Or, you know, gee, I'm going on a cruise for 5 days. Can I just please have 5 days off? No. I'm getting married next week. Can I have at least one night off? Well, maybe. Don't make it a habit. Now then, we come to these very few lines which describe and give us the directions for working a 10th step. And they start right here. On page 84, in the middle of that, about a third of the way, 2/3 of the way down the page, middle of that paragraph, continue to watch for, that means continue to inventory, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. The 4 cardinal defects, the same defects that we found when we did our 4th step. The same defects that the 4th step was deliberately tailored to dig up for us so that we would find them. And in the 5th step, admit. So here in the 10th step, our old friends are back again. It doesn't talk about, oh my gosh, you look at these and you say, well, wait a minute, where's all the sin? I don't see any 7 deadly sins here, do you? They don't exist in the Big Book. The Big Book isn't about sin. The Big Book isn't about any religious or sectarian approach to any of these things. Other literature talks about this stuff, but it's in direct contravention of the Big Book. Sooner or later, we got to decide. I'm going to believe one or the other. If we accept the fact that this Alcoholics Anonymous program is entirely unsectarian, non-sectarian, that we do not pretend to practice anybody's religion, we do not depend upon the particular thoughts or protocols or religious beliefs of any sect or any religion, then we begin to understand how dangerous it is for us to flirt with religious concepts and try to pawn them off as being AA. They're not. So what are we looking for? Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, please look at the word crop. It does not say when we recognize that these are still continuing from when we took our 7th step and God didn't take them away and now we got to deal with them. See, that's conventional wisdom around these rooms today, and it's dead wrong. When these crop up means precisely what we talked about a little while ago. They crop up because the world and all of its people continue to threaten us, and threat translates to fear, and fear warps our natural instincts, and then these defects of character reappear. There's a new cause. A new cause. We still have the same defects because we still have the same natural instincts. And so when fear warps or perverts our natural instincts, we re-experience the same type of bad feelings we had before, but the cause is different. There's no correlation between the two. The stuff we brought in with us is gone. This is new. That's what it says, when these crop up. We ask God at once to remove them. Okay, so now we know, first of all, that we inventoried, we wrote down resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, and fear. And when these cropped up now, that's our 4th step. Now we're going to ask God at once to remove them. That's the 7th step, isn't it? And we discuss them with someone immediately. That's the 5th step. And make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. That's the 9th step. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. That's the 12th step. See how this works? 10th step has all these steps, all these tools we've learned how to use. Boom, 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 boom. They're right here to use every single day as we go through the day. We're not going to let anything get ahead of us. We're not going to put a pony in our bedroom and come back a month later and expect to have a clean bedroom. We're going to clean up the pony poop every day. That way the bedroom stays clean, doesn't it? That's what we're going to do here. We want to know what our present reality is as we go through life. We want to stay in a state of surrender. We want to stay out of self. We want to stay in a state of grace with God. To do that, we have to stay free of the things that block us. So therefore, we take a little bit of time every day to watch out, to be self-aware, to see what's going on, and to take care of these things when they crop up. And we carry a little notebook around. And when something comes up, we get angry at somebody, we just write it down. I'm angry at Jim because umpty-umpty, I didn't do anything wrong, so that's why I'm doing umpty-umps here. He had no reason to be mad at me. How dare him? We write it down. Talk to somebody about it if we can, but most assuredly we ask God to take away the anger. What did we learn about anger back there in the 4th step? Do you remember? What is anger to us? It's a poison. What it tells us is this: if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. And it says these things may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, it's a poison. Somebody says to you, oh gosh, don't you understand, my dear, that there is appropriate anger? And you have to ask them, yeah, is that right? I suppose you also think there's appropriate strychnine. But you got to walk through your fears and you don't worry about anger. Because everybody gets angry, don't they? Well, you got to own your anger. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Let's see. What is the term that they're using today? Claim it. Claim it. What in the hell does that mean? I'm sorry, I digress. You see, why do we have to fool around with all this crappy stuff when we got the tools right here that take care of this stuff automatically? Why do we have to get involved in all these complicated ideas? Somebody have a question? Somebody was unhappy? I don't know. But don't forget, you're only as sick as your secrets, which means very clearly that if you don't have any secrets, you're well. Let's see. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Aha. Here we go. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help, and then we get the rule. Now this rule is something which is going to be difficult to live up to because it runs contrary to most of what we've always done before. Well, let's see what this rule is. Love and tolerance of others is our code. There's a whole lot of meaning in here that we need to think about because it isn't nearly so difficult as we might think. We've been trained, we've been taught that we don't take any insults, we don't let people disrespect us, we react violently sometimes, and nobody's going to use us for a doormat, on and on and on. And naturally, if you do something to me, I'm going to hate you. And then we have this business of tolerance. What in the world is tolerance? Well, a lot of people say, well, you know, you got to understand that I'm not at all prejudiced. Some of my best friends are this or that. That's the biggest bunch of hooey in the world. But this isn't talking about something which is in our heads. You see, if love and tolerance of others meant that we had to go around with a clean mind, always loving everybody in our minds and always tolerant of everybody in our minds, we'd never make it. That ain't going to happen. But it's much easier than that. It's very simple. Love is not a state of mind. Love is loving action. Tolerance isn't a state of mind. Tolerance is being tolerant. See the difference? Now, this says love and tolerance of others is our code, which means that I act with love toward others, and I act with tolerance toward others. Now, I'm not powerless over my actions. I can take right action. I can do the next right thing. And that's what we're going to set out to do, and we're going to ask God to help us take this right action. Because every time we take right action, we get right thinking. Thought follows action. We take right action, we get right thinking. Thought follows action. We always thought it was the other way around. It's not. Now this is one of the most beautiful things about working the 12 steps is that when we find out that we are not acting under some kind of irresistible impulse, we are not certifiably insane, we're not going to be able to get away with murder by saying, sure I murdered her, but I couldn't help myself. It was an irresistible impulse. In some states you go free for saying that. Or they might just lock you up for a while, and then 3 or 4 psychiatrists later they'll say, well, he's cured. Now, you don't get in that guy's way again because he's got the built-in excuse, irresistible impulse. Well, stop and think about this. It's exactly the same kind of stuff we carry in here with us because we've been taught that somehow or another we're not responsible. Look at all the things that have been done to us. Look at our dysfunctional families. Look at our accidents of birth or color or religion, all the other things. Look at the turmoil our lives have been in. Look at the stuff we were taught. Look at the damage that's been done to us. No wonder you did what you did, poor thing. You're not responsible. Have another pill. And we have to learn that that's balderdash too. For most of us, it's simply true that we are responsible and that our problem resides in our selfishness and self-centeredness, and that we have to be rid of this selfishness or it'll kill us. Now, if we go back to this love and tolerance of others, and we understand that we are not powerless to take action, right action, what does that mean? It simply means that we're going to discipline ourselves and we're going to will ourselves to act with love and act with tolerance. And we may not feel like doing it at all. And then somebody's going to say, well, you can't be a hypocrite. The hell you can't. Want to recover? Take right action. See what happens. Act with love. Act with tolerance. And all of a sudden, it's amazing what happens. We begin to feel love. When we pray for somebody, we cannot hate them anymore. The more we pray, the more we come to love them. It's amazing what happens. And we start out hating and we end up loving. And love doesn't mean that we're ready to go to bed with them, even if they're an ex-husband. It means that we have the love that God has for them. See, let's think back now and then we'll understand fully what this means. In our third step prayer, what did we ask God to do? We asked Him to take away our difficulties, that victory over them might bear witness to those we would help of what? Of His power, His love, and His way of life. So it is God's love that we are to reflect to others. That's what this code means. It doesn't mean that we're going to go around with the love of human nature, of humanity in our hearts. It means that we're going to act with love. We're going to emulate God's love because He has granted us the great gift of allowing us to show through our actions His love, His power, and His way of life shining in and through us. And when we look at it from that standpoint, then it does not seem to be some insurmountable thing. And so when we feel all jammed up and choked up about this, we ask Him for help. We say, God, please let me show your love and your tolerance for my brethren, even though I may not feel like it. Even though I've got every excuse in the world for not doing it, I know I must do it anyway. Please help me. Please show me the right way, and please give me your power, because I know that this is your will for me. And when we do that, man, it really works. Again, we say, wow, that worked. And when we say that, this again reinforces us in our belief and in our trust and in our faith. Okay, now next week we're going to be taking a look at the next 3 paragraphs, which are powerful paragraphs. They tell us where we have come to and where we need to go. I want to thank all of you for allowing me